This 4-year-old beggar girl was kicked every time she asked for food on the street, until a millionaire stopped his Ferrari and did this. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The relentless March rain lashed against the brick streets of Willow Creek, turning every corner into a small river of dirty water, carrying the day's debris. Lily curled up even tighter against the cold wall of O'Malley's bakery, her 6 years weighing on her like decades on her skinny shoulders. The faded and torn pink t-shirt clung to her chilled skin, and her bare feet had long lost sensitivity to the cold of the wet ground. "Please, just a little piece of bread," she mumbled to the man in a blue suit coming out of the bakery, extending her small, dirty hand in a gesture that had become automatic after 3 years of living on the streets. 3 years since her mom, Isabel, had disappeared during one of her episodes, leaving her alone in a world that seemed determined to ignore her existence. The man didn't even look at her. Worse, as he passed, he raised his foot and delivered a precise kick to her ribs. "Get out of the way, you little stink! You're blocking the store," he snarled, adjusting his black umbrella as he hurried away. Lily rolled onto the wet ground, clutching her aching ribs, but didn't cry. She had learned that tears only attracted more cruelty. Instead, she leaned back against the wall, watching the morning traffic with those big, intelligent eyes that always drew attention but never compassion. Her mind, even at 6, worked differently from other children. She could remember every detail of the faces of the people who passed, every word said with disdain, every gesture of rejection. It was as if her memory was a camera that never stopped, working, storing everything in perfectly organized compartments in her mind. The roar of an engine cut through the sound of the rain like thunder. Lily looked up and saw something that seemed out of a dream. A gleaming red Ferrari, braking sharply right in front of her, splashing gutter water in all directions. The car was so shiny that it reflected the lights of the bakery like a mirror, contrasting absurdly with the misery of that corner. The driver's door opened, and a tall man, about 50 years old, stepped out, wearing an impeccable grey suit that cost more than most people in town earned in a year. Richard Sterling had perfectly groomed grey hair and brown eyes that carried an invisible weight, a deep sadness that seemed to echo Lily's own pain. He stopped in front of her, completely ignoring the rain that was beginning to stain his expensive suit. For a moment that seemed eternal, the two stared at each other in silence. Lily saw something in his eyes that she hadn't recognized for a long time. Not pity, not disgust. It was something different, deeper. "How long have you been here?" Richard asked, his voice deep but surprisingly gentle. "Always," Lily replied, her voice hoarse from so long without talking to someone who really wanted to hear her answer. Richard crouched down, getting to her level, not caring that his knees touched the wet, dirty ground. "What's your name?" "Lily." "Lily," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. "Where are your parents?" The girl lowered her eyes. "Mom's gone, a long time ago." Something broke in Richard's chest at that moment. The way she said "Mom's gone" echoed inside him like a cry of pain. He knew that feeling of abandonment well, that pain of losing someone who should be there, caring, protecting. "Are you hungry?" Lily nodded, unable to hide the hope that shone in her eyes. Richard got up and went into the bakery, returning a few minutes later with a paper bag full of bread, cakes, and cookies. He sat on the ground next to her, completely oblivious to the curious glances of passers-by who couldn't understand why such a well-dressed man was sitting on the sidewalk with a street girl. "Eat," he said, offering her a warm cinnamon roll. Lily devoured the food with desperate hunger, but her eyes never stopped watching Richard. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't identify, but that made her heart beat faster. It was as if she already knew him from somewhere, as if that encounter wasn't an accident. "Would you like to get out of this rain?" Richard asked after she finished eating. "Where to?" "To a warm place. Safe. Lily studied his face for a long moment. Her mind recorded every detail. The small scar on his forehead, the way he pressed his lips together when he thought, the way his hands trembled slightly. Something inside her, an intuition that had developed to survive on the streets, told her she could trust him. "Okay," she whispered. Richard helped her up and led her to the Ferrari. As the doors closed and the heating enveloped Lily like a warm hug, she couldn't help but sigh with relief. It had been so long since she had felt safe. As Richard drove through the familiar streets of Willow Creek, Lily watched everything out the window with attention. Every house, every building, every tree was recorded in her perfect memory. But when they turned onto a specific street, something strange happened. She began to recognize the way, as if she had been there before, even though she was sure she had never been in that part of town. "Mister," she said suddenly, "why did you help me?" Richard gripped the steering wheel tighter. The question hit a painful place in his soul, a place where he kept the memory of another child, his own daughter, whom he had failed to save. "Because sometimes," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "we all need a second chance." What neither of them knew was that this second chance was about to reveal secrets that would change their lives forever. Secrets buried for years in the shadows of a mansion that Lily would recognize as soon as she saw it. The mansion that rose before Lily seemed out of a fairy tale, but not the kind with happy endings. It was an imposing 3-story building, with huge windows protected by ornate bars, and a garden that had once been lush, but now showed clear signs of neglect. The wilted flowers and the tall grass contrasted with the grandeur of the colonial architecture, creating a melancholic atmosphere that made Lily feel a chill down her spine. But what disturbed her the most was the strange feeling of recognition that took over her as soon as her eyes landed on the facade. It was as if a door opened in her mind, revealing fragmented images. A woman in a blue apron carrying buckets of water, the sound of a broom against the marble floor, the smell of cleaning, products mixed with the aroma of fresh flowers. "We're here," Richard said, turning off the engine of the Ferrari. His voice sounded strained, as if he himself were nervous about what he was about to do. As they walked toward the front door, Lily observed every detail with her photographic memory. The peeling paint on the gates, the broken tiles on the roof, the fogged glass of some windows. Everything indicated that the family was going through financial difficulties, even though they were trying to keep up appearances. Richard took a deep breath before turning the key in the lock. "Lily, I need you to understand something. I'm going to tell my wife that you're the daughter of an employee who is no longer here. It's important that you don't contradict this story, okay?" The girl nodded, although she didn't completely understand why he needed to lie. On the streets, she had learned that adults always had their reasons for hiding the truth, and that asking too many questions could bring trouble. The door opened before Richard could even ring the bell. Gillian Sterling appeared in the doorway, like a figure out of a painting. Tall, elegant, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a silk dress that cost more than many families spent in a month. But her blue eyes were red and swollen, as if she had been crying recently, and her hands trembled slightly as she held a crumpled tissue. "Richard, where were you? The men from the bank were here again, making more threats about the—" She stopped abruptly when her eyes met Lily's. "Who is this child?" "Gillian, this is Lily," Richard said, placing his hand protectively on the girl's shoulder. "Isabel's daughter. Remember her? She worked here as a cleaner a few years ago." Hearing her mother's name, Lily felt her heart race. How did Richard know about Isabel? And why had her mother worked in this house that she seemed to recognize, even though she had never been there before? Gillian frowned, as if trying to remember. Isabel. The brunette who was fired because... Oh yes, now I remember. Her expression hardened. What is her daughter doing here? Isabel is gone, Gillian. And Lily has no one else. I thought we could... No! The word came out of Gillian's lips like a whip. Absolutely not. We already have enough problems without having to take care of a former employee's daughter. Lily felt her chest tighten. It was always like this. They always rejected her, always saw her as a burden. But something in the way Gillian looked at her was different. It wasn't just rejection. There was pain there, a deep pain that Lily recognized because she carried a similar one. "Please," Lily murmured, her small voice echoing in the luxurious entrance hall. "I won't bother you. I can sleep in any corner." Gillian stopped talking and really looked at the girl for the first time. She saw the big, intelligent eyes, the extreme thinness, the torn clothes. For a moment, something moved inside her, a painful memory of other times, other hopes. "She's dirty," Gillian said finally, but her voice had lost some of its harshness. "She'll need a bath, clean clothes." "I'll take care of it," Richard said quickly, realizing that his wife was giving in. "And where will she sleep? The house is... We don't have a guest room available at the moment." It was a lie. They had empty rooms, but Gillian didn't want to admit that they had sold all the furniture from the extra rooms to pay off debts. "She can use the room of..." Richard stopped abruptly, the words dying in his throat. He was going to say Sophia's room, but he couldn't pronounce the name of the daughter they had lost. Gillian understood immediately, and her eyes filled with tears. "No, that room stays closed." "Then she can stay in the guest room on the second floor," Richard said quickly. As the adults argued about her fate, Lily let her mind wander through the mansion. Even standing in the entrance hall, she could visualize other rooms. A spacious kitchen with marble countertops, a living room with a black grand piano, an office with shelves full of books and a dark wood desk. The images came in flashes, as if she were recalling a dream. "I know this house," she said suddenly, interrupting the discussion between Richard and Gillian. Both turned to her, surprised. "What do you mean, honey?" Richard asked, crouching down to get to her level. "I've been here before. With Mom. She cleaned the kitchen floor and always sang softly while she worked." Lily closed her eyes, concentrating on the memory. "There was a blue vase on the kitchen table, always with yellow flowers, and in the office there was a picture of a blonde girl in a gold frame." Gillian turned pale. The blue vase had been broken 2 years ago, and the photo that Lily described was of Sophia, which was on Richard's desk. "That's impossible," Gillian murmured. "You were too little when your mother worked here. How can you remember such specific details?" Lily opened her eyes and stared at Gillian with an intensity disturbing for a 6-year-old. "I remember everything. I always remember everything." A heavy silence took over the hall. Richard and Gillian exchanged glances, both feeling that there was something much more complex in this situation than they had initially imagined. "Let's go inside," Richard said, finally. "Lily must be cold." As they walked through the house, Lily continued describing details she shouldn't know. The dark stain on the living room carpet where someone had spilled coffee, the noise the office door made when it was closed, the smell of lavender that always came from the master bedroom. Gillian watched the girl with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. There was something disturbing about the way Lily moved through the house, as if she were following an invisible map in her mind. When they reached the kitchen, Lily stopped in front of the window that overlooked the backyard and pointed to a specific flower bed. "That's where Mom hid something important, in a metal box, under the red rose bush." Richard felt his blood run cold. If Isabel had hidden something on his property, it meant she knew something. And considering the legal problems he was facing, anything that a former employee might have hidden in his house was not good news. "What kind of thing did she hide?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Lily shrugged. Important papers. She said that one day someone would come looking for them. At that moment the doorbell rang, echoing through the house like a bad omen. Richard and Gillian exchanged glances, both knowing that no one brought them good news lately. When Richard opened the door, he found two men in dark suits with serious expressions and a briefcase full of documents. "Mr. Sterling, we're from the IRS. We need to talk to you about some irregularities in your tax returns." The silence that followed the arrival of the IRS agents was deafening. Richard felt cold sweat drip down his forehead as he watched the two investigators standing on his doorstep, their expressions impassive as ice masks. Behind him, he could feel Gillian approaching, her accelerated breathing revealing the panic that was taking over her. "May I see your documents?" asked Richard, trying to buy time while his mind worked frantically, searching for a way out of that situation. The taller of the men, who introduced himself as Agent Miller, extended an official ID. "Mr. Sterling, we have a court order to search your property and seize documents related to your business activities for the past 5 years. Lily, who had remained quiet in the kitchen, approached the entrance hall silently. Her mind instantly photographed the faces of the two men. Miller had a small scar on his chin and wore a college ring on his right hand. The other, shorter and fatter, had a grey mustache and constantly bit his lower lip. Details she would forever store in her perfect memory. "This is absurd," protested Gillian, her voice trembling with anger and fear. "My husband is an honest businessman. He would never do anything illegal." Agent Miller completely ignored Gillian and focused on Richard. "So we need access to your office, computers, physical files, and any documentation related to Sterling Mining Corp." Richard knew he had no choice. The evidence against him was circumstantial, but enough to justify an investigation. The problem was that some of the documents in his office could be misinterpreted, especially those related to his most creative tax deduction operations. "Of course, come in. But I would appreciate it if you respected my family during the process," he said, opening the door completely. As the investigators entered, Lily noticed something strange. The shorter man looked at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. It wasn't normal curiosity about a child. There was something deeper, almost like recognition. The next 40 minutes were silent torture. The investigators searched Richard's office methodically, seizing documents, photographing others, and taking notes on tablets. Gillian walked around the house like a ghost, nervously fiddling with her jewelry and muttering prayers softly. Richard watched everything with a racing heart, especially when the men approached the safe behind his desk. There were some documents stored there that could be problematic if analyzed out of context. "Mr. Sterling," said Agent Miller, "we need you to open the safe." "You need another court order for that," Richard replied, knowing his rights. "Actually, no," said the shorter man, speaking for the first time. His voice had a familiar tone that made Lily frown. "The order we have is quite comprehensive." As Richard reluctantly opened the safe, Lily moved closer to the short man. There was something about him that sparked a distant memory, something related to her mother. Suddenly, a flash image crossed her mind. Isabel talking nervously to a mustached man, handing him some papers while whispering something about protecting Lily. "I know you," Lily said suddenly, her childish voice cutting through the tension of the room. Everyone turned to her. The short man looked visibly uncomfortable. "What do you mean, kid?" Agent Miller asked. "He talked to my mom once. She was very nervous afterward," Lily said, pointing to the mustached man. "You told her you were going to protect something important." The short man, who had not introduced himself until then, turned pale. "The child must be confusing me with someone else." But Richard had noticed the change in his expression. "What's your name again?" Agent Davis," the man replied, but his voice trembled slightly. Lily shook her head. No, Mom called you Uncle Ron. You always gave her money when she was sad. The silence that followed was deadly. Agent Miller looked at his colleague with growing suspicion, while Richard felt the pieces of a puzzle beginning to fit together in his mind. Ron Davis, Richard murmured. Wait, Ron Graham. The mustached man closed his eyes, knowing that his disguise had been discovered by a 6-year-old with extraordinary memory. It's okay. Enough with the theatrics. Oh my God, Gillian whispered, finally understanding what was happening. You were the one who made the complaint to the IRS. You want to destroy Richard to take over the company alone. The company was already failing because of his incompetence, Ron retorted, the entire mask of a public servant abandoned. I just accelerated the inevitable process. Lily continued to observe everything with her big, attentive eyes. Her mind worked quickly, connecting information she had heard years ago when her mother was still lucid. Mum said you were a bad man, that you did wrong things with money that wasn't yours. Shut that kid up, Ron said, his face contorted with anger. Don't talk to her like that, Richard said, stepping forward. And you, he turned to Agent Miller, your colleague here is an imposter. He's using false documents and participating in a sham. Agent Miller looked at the ID that Ron had dropped and then at the man he had known for only a few weeks. Explain this immediately. I can explain, said a weak voice coming from the entrance of the room. Everyone turned to see Gillian holding a cell phone with the screen on. I just recorded this entire confession, and I've already sent a copy to my lawyer. Ron turned completely pale. You don't understand what you're doing, Gillian. There are things you don't know, documents that Isabel collected when she worked here. If they come to light... What documents? Richard asked. Lily raised her small hand. The papers that Mom hid in the garden. She said they were very important, that they proved that someone was stealing money from the company. All eyes turned to her again. The girl had become, without realizing it, the key piece of a puzzle much more complex than anyone imagined. Where exactly did your mother hide those papers? Agent Miller asked, now genuinely interested in the real investigation. Under the red rose bush, in a metal box, Lily replied. Ron made a move to head for the exit, but Agent Miller stopped him. You're not going anywhere until this is cleared up. Richard looked at Lily with a mixture of gratitude and astonishment. In just a few hours, that girl he had found on the streets had unmasked a conspiracy that could have completely destroyed his life. Let's go to the garden, he said. It's time to find out what Isabel really knew. As the group headed to the backyard, Lily held Richard's hand tightly. For the first time in years, she felt like she was in the right place, with the right people. But a part of her wondered what other surprises her perfect memory would still reveal about her mother's past and her connection to that family. What she didn't imagine was that finding those documents would be just the beginning of much more shocking discoveries about her own origins. The back garden of the Sterling mansion was immersed in the dampness of the rainy afternoon. The group walked in silence across the soaked lawn, each step sinking slightly into the soft earth. Lily led the way with a confidence that contrasted strangely with her age, heading directly to a specific flower bed where red roses struggled against the neglect of recent months. There, she said, pointing to a particularly dense rosebush. Mom said she chose this place because the thorns would protect the secret. Richard grabbed a shovel from the shed in the back, his hands trembling slightly, not from the cold, but from the anxiety of what they might find. Ron remained next to Agent Miller, who watched him with growing distrust, clearly reassessing the entire investigation. Careful with the roots, Lily murmured, watching Richard dig. She buried it deep, about the size of my hand. After 15 minutes of careful digging, the shovel made a metallic noise against something solid. Richard exchanged the tool for his hands, delicately removing the soil until he revealed a small, rusty metal box, the kind used to store cookies. "That's the box," Lily confirmed, her eyes shining with a mixture of nostalgia and sadness. "Mom cried when she buried it here." Gillian, who had remained silent throughout the excavation, approached as Richard carefully opened the box. Inside, protected by a double plastic bag, were a considerable number of documents, photographs, and what appeared to be an old cassette tape. Agent Miller held out his hands. "As a federal officer, I need to examine these documents first." Actually," said a firm voice behind them, "as the Sterling family lawyer, I request that the analysis be done in the presence of all interested parties." Everyone turned to see a tall man of about 40 years old, wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Dr. Mark Olson had been Richard's lawyer for over a decade and knew well all the complexities of his business. "Dr. Olson," Richard said, relieved, "how did you know we needed you?" "Gillian called me when the investigators arrived. I arrived at the exact moment, it seems." His eyes fixed on Ron. "And you must be the famous partner who's been trying to destroy my client." Ron didn't answer, but his expression of discomfort was evident. Back in the mansion's living room, the documents were spread out on the dining table, with everyone watching intently. What they revealed was much more serious than anyone imagined. "Oh my God," murmured Dr. Olson, examining a series of contracts. "These documents show irregular financial transfers, shell corporations, front companies." "And look at these photographs," said Agent Miller, holding up several images that showed Ron in meetings with men who clearly weren't legitimate businessmen. "Some date back 5 years. Lily, who had climbed onto a chair to see the documents better, pointed to a specific photo. "This man was at our house when I was little. He made Mom cry." The photo showed Ron handing an envelope to a bald and corpulent man in front of a building that Richard recognized as being from the city administration. "That proves bribery of public officials," said Dr. Olson, his voice grave. "Ron, you weren't just embezzling money from the company, you were using Sterling mining for money laundering operations." "You don't understand," Ron finally exploded. "It was necessary. The company was losing contracts to competitors who offered bribes. We either got into the game or we would go bankrupt." So you decided to get into the game and then blame me," Richard said, his voice filled with indignation and pain. "How many years of friendship, Ron? Since college?" Gillian, who had remained quiet, picked up one of the photos. "Wait, I know this place." The image showed Ron talking to the bald man in front of a specific building. "It's the city hospital. I was getting fertility treatment there." "And what's the relevance of that?" asked Dr. Olson. "Because this man," Gillian pointed to the bald man in the photo, "is Dr. Robert Harris, the administrative director of the hospital. He always asked about Richard's business during my appointments. At the time, I thought it was just polite conversation." Lily climbed onto the chair again, examining the photo more closely. "Mum worked at the hospital cleaning too. She said this bald man was very bad, that he hurt people." A heavy silence took over the room. The pieces of the puzzle were fitting together in a much more sinister way than anyone imagined. "Agent Miller," said Dr. Olson, "I believe we have here evidence of a corruption network that goes far beyond my client's tax problems. This is a case for the FBI." "I completely agree," replied Miller, already grabbing his cell phone. "And you," he said to Ron, "you're under arrest." But when everyone turned to where Ron was, they discovered he had disappeared. The back door was open, and raindrops were entering the house. "Shit, he ran," Richard said. "He won't get far," said Agent Miller, dialing quickly. "I'm already alerting the FBI and the airports." Lily pulled on Gillian's sleeve. Aunt Jillian, there's one more thing. What is it, honey? Mom hid more things, not just here in the house. Everyone turned to the girl, who was now seen as the key to unlocking that entire conspiracy. Where else did she hide documents? Asked Dr. Olson, crouching down to get to her level. At the church, that little church where we slept when it was very cold. She said God would protect the important secrets. Richard felt his heart race. If Isabel had spread evidence in multiple locations, it meant she knew her life was in danger. Lily, he said gently, do you remember which church it is? St. Sebastian's Church, down the street. There's a very old priest who always gave us bread. Jillian, who had remained watching everything in silence, suddenly rose from the chair with a strange expression on her face. Richard, I need to talk to you. In private. Now is not the time for... Yes, it is, she interrupted, her voice filled with an urgency that he rarely heard. It's about Isabel, and about why I really fired her. Dr. Olson noticed the tension in the air. Perhaps it's better to solve one thing at a time. Let's first go to the church and recover what Isabel hid there. No, Jillian said firmly. Before we take another step, you need to know the truth, the whole truth. Lily watched the adults with her characteristic attention, her mind photographing. Every expression, every gesture, something was about to be revealed, something that would change everything again. Isabel wasn't just fired, Jillian continued, her hands shaking. She found out something about me, something I did that I can't hide anymore. The silence in the room was so deep that you could hear the rain beating against the windows. Richard looked at his wife with a mixture of fear and confusion. What did you do, Jillian? She looked at Lily, then at her husband, and finally at the documents scattered on the table. I was the one who provided information about our company to Dr. Robert Harris. I betrayed you, Richard, and when Isabel found out, I threatened her to keep her quiet. Jillian's confession echoed through the room like thunder, leaving everyone paralyzed. Richard looked at the woman he had been married to for 15 years, as if she were a complete stranger. His legs weakened, and he leaned on the table, knocking over some of the documents they had just discovered. You betrayed me, he murmured, his voice coming out as an incredulous whisper. Why, Jillian? Why would you do that to me? Jillian covered her face with her hands, tears streaming between her fingers. Because I was desperate, Richard. You didn't give me attention. You were always working, always obsessed with the company. And I wanted to have a child more than anything in the world. Dudi, what the hell does that have to do with you passing information about our company to that corrupt guy? Dr. Harris promised he would get me special fertility treatment, Jillian sobbed. He said he knew specialists in the United States, that he could arrange everything if I helped him with some information about your mining contracts. Lily, who had been watching everything in silence, slid off the chair and approached Jillian. With her childish intuition, she perceived the genuine pain in the woman, a pain she recognized because she also knew despair. Aunt Jillian, she said softly, Mom always said that when people do wrong things, it's usually because they're very hurt in their hearts. Dr. Olson cleared his throat, trying to bring some order to that explosive emotional situation. Jillian, I need you to tell us exactly what kind of information you passed to Dr. Harris and how long it lasted. It was just some information about contracts, she said, wiping her eyes. Locations of future mining projects, approximate values, nothing that I thought could really harm the company. Nothing that could harm? Richard exploded. Jillian, that information allowed our competitors to always know our strategies. That's why we were losing so many contracts. Agent Miller, who had remained professionally silent during the family revelation, spoke up. Mrs. Sterling, Do you understand that you have just confessed to participating in an industrial espionage scheme? I know, she whispered. When I realized what I had gotten myself into, I tried to stop. But Dr. Harris said that if I didn't continue to collaborate, he would tell everything to Richard in a way that would make me look much worse than I really was. And that's when Isabel found out? Dr. Olson asked. Gillian nodded miserably. She was cleaning my closet and found some papers that Dr. Harris had given me to copy. When she confronted me, I panicked. Lily remembered something and pulled on Gillian's skirt. Was that why Mom was very scared that day? She came home crying and said that a lady had yelled at her. I didn't yell, Gillian protested weakly. I just said that if she told anything to anyone, I would make sure she never got a job anywhere in town again. You threatened a desperate woman who was just trying to survive and take care of her daughter, Richard said, his voice filled with disappointment and anger. I was desperate too, Gillian retorted. You have no idea what it's like to try to have a child and always fail. Seeing other pregnant women on the street made me want to die of envy. The conversation was interrupted by the doorbell ringing insistently. Dr. Olson went to answer and returned accompanied by 2 FBI agents and a woman in a dark suit who introduced herself as FBI Director Sarah Jenkins. We received Agent Miller's report about the situation here, she said, observing the documents scattered on the table. Where is the suspect, Ron Graham? He fled through the back when he discovered he had been unmasked, Richard replied. We have already issued an arrest warrant and alerted all exit points in the city, the director said. But we need all the documents related to the case. While the agents organized the evidence, Lily pulled on Richard's sleeve. Uncle Richard, can I say something important? Of course, honey. Mom hid more papers at the church, but there's one thing she always said when she was sicker in the head. What thing? She talked about a man who was someone's daddy, but didn't know. She said that this secret was very dangerous. Everyone in the room turned to Lily. The director crouched down to get to the girl's level. Lily, can you try to remember exactly what your mother said about that? The girl closed her eyes, concentrating on her perfect memory. She said, My Lily has a daddy who doesn't know she exists, and he's an important man who someone wants to hurt. She repeated that when she got very nervous, an icy silence took over the room. Gillian turned white as paper. Richard frowned, confused, and the director exchanged glances with her colleagues. Lily, said Director Jenkins carefully, did your mother ever say who that important man was? She never said the name, but once she said that he worked with stones that shine under the ground. Mining, Dr. Olson murmured. Richard felt a chill down his spine. Lily, do you have any idea who it could be? Before the girl could answer, Gillian abruptly rose from the chair, knocking it over in the process. I need air, this is too much. She ran to the backyard, leaving everyone confused. Lily watched her through the window, and suddenly her eyes widened. Aunt Gillian is trying to pull out the flowers where we found the box, she said, alarmed. Everyone ran to the backyard and found Gillian digging desperately in the same spot, where they had found Isabel's documents, her hands full of dirt and tears streaming down her face. Gillian, what are you doing? Richard asked, trying to hold her back. There's another box, she sobbed, one that I buried here 5 years ago, when I found out that Isabel was pregnant. The revelation fell like a bomb. Director Jenkins immediately ordered her men to bring professional excavation equipment. Gillian, said Dr. Olson firmly, you need to tell us exactly what's in that box you buried. She looked at Lily, then at Richard, and finally at the police officers. They are documents that prove Lily's paternity. What do you mean? Richard asked. Isabel did a DNA test when she was pregnant. She wanted to be sure who the father was, and when she found out the result... Gillian paused, struggling to continue. She looked for me, because she knew that the information could destroy a marriage. Lily watched everything with her characteristic attention, but something in her expression suggested that she was beginning to understand things that a 6-year-old shouldn't understand. "Aunt Gillian," she said softly, "are you saying that my daddy wasn't who Mom said he was?" "Your mother never lied about who your father was, honey," Gillian replied, looking directly at Richard. "She just never had the courage to tell him." Richard felt the world spin around him. "Are you insinuating that—" "I'm not insinuating anything," Gillian said, her voice now firm despite the tears. "I'm saying clearly, Lily is your daughter, Richard, and I buried the DNA test here so you would never find out." The silence that followed was absolute. Not even the sound of the rain seemed to be able to penetrate the bubble of shock that formed around the group. Lily looked at Richard with her big, intelligent eyes, as if she were seeing him for the first time. "So that's why I knew the house," she said finally, her voice small but clear. "Because it's my real daddy's house." The revelation that Lily was Richard's daughter created an emotional vortex that consumed the entire atmosphere of the mansion. Richard looked alternately at the girl and at Gillian, as if trying to process information impossible to absorb. His eyes were red, not just from tears, but from the deep shock that threatened to shatter everything he thought he knew about his life. "This can't be true," he murmured, running his hands through his hair. "Gillian, how could you hide something like this from me for 5 years?" Because I wanted to protect our marriage," she exploded, still kneeling in the damp earth. "Isabel came to me when she found out she was pregnant. She said she didn't want to cause problems, that she would raise the child alone, but that she needed me to know the truth in case something happened to her." Lily approached Richard slowly, her extraordinary mind quickly processing all the information. "Uncle, Daddy, was that why you helped me today? Because some part of you already knew?" The girl's question hit Richard like a punch in the stomach. He remembered the moment in the bakery, the inexplicable feeling of connection he felt when he saw that child suffering, the irresistible impulse to protect her. "I didn't know," he said, kneeling down to get to her level, "but maybe my heart knew somehow." Director Jenkins, who had observed the entire family revelation with professional interest, intervened. "We need to focus on the case. These personal revelations are important, but we have a corruption network to dismantle," Dr. Olson agreed. "Director, I suggest we first retrieve the documents that Isabel hid at the church. They may contain crucial information about Dr. Harris and others involved in the scheme." "What about the DNA test that was buried here?" asked one of the officers. "Dig it up," ordered the director. "All the evidence is important." As the officers began to excavate the spot indicated by Gillian, a black car stopped in front of the mansion. A corpulent man got out of it, whom Lily immediately recognized from the photographs found in the first box. "It's him!" she shouted, pointing. "It's the bald man who made Mom cry." Dr. Robert Harris walked towards the house with determined steps, apparently oblivious to the presence of the federal agents. When he realized the situation, it was too late to escape. "Dr. Robert Harris," said Director Jenkins, showing her identification. "You're under arrest." "On what grounds?" he asked, trying to maintain his composure, but his voice trembled visibly. "Corruption, racketeering, money laundering," enumerated the director. "Do you want me to continue?" Dr. Harris looked around, seeing the documents scattered, the excavations in the garden, and finally his eyes landed on Lily. His expression changed instantly to one of panic. "The girl shouldn't be here," he said, almost to himself. "Why not?" asked Richard, approaching threateningly. "What do you have to do with my daughter?" "Ah, your daughter?" Dr. Harris laughed bitterly. "You finally found out." Lily watched the man with her characteristic attention, and suddenly another memory surfaced in her perfect mind. "You're the one who gave Mom money when she was very sick. In the head, but you also said bad things to her." "What kind of bad things?" asked the director. "He said that if she told secrets about important people, bad things would happen to me," said Lily, her voice remaining surprisingly calm for a child. "Mom got very scared afterwards." Dr. Harris turned completely pale. "The child is confusing things. I just helped Isabel financially when she needed it." "Helped why?" Dr. Olson pressed. "What interest did you have in a hospital cleaner?" "Because Isabel found out something that could ruin my career," admitted Dr. Harris, realizing that there was no way to escape the truth anymore. "She was cleaning my office and saw documents about overbilling of medication." "And you blackmailed her?" "To keep quiet," said the director. "It wasn't blackmail. It was a mutually beneficial agreement. I helped her financially, and she kept her mouth shut about what she saw." Gillian, who had remained silent during the impromptu interrogation, rose slowly. "You blackmailed me too, Robert. When I started to have doubts about passing information about my husband's company, you threatened to tell him about my participation in the scheme." "Was that why you fired Isabel so abruptly?" Richard asked, the pieces finally fitting together in his mind. "I found out that Robert was using information he got from me to blackmail other people too," said Gillian. "When I realized that Isabel was being threatened because of the documents she had seen, I panicked. I thought that if she no longer worked in our house, she would be safer. But you also couldn't reveal why you were firing her, because that would expose your own participation in the scheme," concluded Dr. Olson. Lily pulled on Richard's sleeve. "Daddy, can I tell you something Mom told me before she got very sick?" "Of course, my daughter," he said, still getting used to those words. "She said that Dr. Harris wasn't just a regular bad man. She said that he hurt sick children in the hospital." A deadly silence took over the group. Dr. Harris tried to deny it, but Lily continued. "Mom saw him charging money from families of sick children to give them medicine that the hospital should have given for free. And when the parents couldn't pay, the children didn't get the medicine." Director Jenkins picked up her phone immediately. "I need a team in the administration of City Hospital now. Possible extortion scheme involving child medical treatment." Dr. Harris finally broke down. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. Ron Graham was constantly pressuring me for insider information. He said that if I didn't collaborate, he would destroy my medical career." "So Ron was in charge of the whole operation?" Richard asked. "Not just in charge," said Dr. Harris, looking directly at Lily. "He knew about the girl's paternity even before you found out. He was the one who ordered me to keep Isabel under control." "How did he know?" Gillian asked. "Because he arranged the original DNA test," revealed Dr. Harris. "Ron suspected you were having an affair, Richard, and investigated. When he found out about Isabel and the child, he saw an opportunity for future blackmail." Richard felt a homicidal rage grow inside him. "You're saying that Ron knew that Lily was my daughter 5 years ago and never told me?" "He was saving that information for the right moment. He planned to use it to force you to hand over your share of the company to him. At that moment, the officers who were digging in the garden shouted that they had found something. A second metal box was unearthed, this one even better preserved than the first. When they opened it, they found not only the DNA test confirming Richard's paternity, but also a handwritten letter from Isabel and a series of photographs showing Ron handing money to Dr. Harris on several occasions. Dr. Olson picked up the letter and read aloud, "If something happens to me, please give these evidences to the authorities. My daughter Lily is the daughter of Richard Sterling, a good man who doesn't know of her existence. She deserves to meet her real father, and he deserves to know that he has a daughter who loves him even without knowing him. Dr. Harris and Ron." Graham are using information about my family to blackmail innocent people. They are dangerous. Please protect my girl." Tears streamed down Richard's face as he hugged Lily tightly. "Your mother was a very brave woman," he whispered. "I know," Lily replied, resting her head on his chest. "She always said that one day I would find my real daddy and that he would protect me from all the bad things." Director Jenkins closed the handcuffs on Dr. Harris. "Do you have more information about Ron Graham's whereabouts?" "Lily said there are more documents hidden at St. Sebastian's Church," Gillian reminded. "Then that's where we're going now," said the director. "This corruption network ends today." But what none of them knew was that Ron hadn't fled the city. He was watching the mansion from afar and had overheard about the documents at the church. A race against time was about to begin. St. Sebastian's Church stood on the outskirts of Willow Creek, like a refuge forgotten by time. It was a simple stone building with only one bell tower and stained glass windows that had already lost much of their original shine. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy, creating a heavy atmosphere that matched the tension of the group approaching the temple. Lily walked between Richard and Gillian, holding both their hands. The discovery that Richard was her father had created a strange sense of completeness in her small heart, as if a piece that had always been missing had finally found its place. At the same time, seeing Gillian so shattered by guilt awakened in her a deep compassion. "That's where Mom and I slept when it was very cold," Lily said, pointing to a small side annex of the church. "Father Michael always left the door open for people who had nowhere to stay." Director Jenkins and her men had arrived before them, and were already talking to an elderly gentleman in a black cassock who gestured animatedly as he spoke. When he saw Lily approaching, the priest's face lit up with a genuine smile. "Lily!" exclaimed Father Michael, 78, opening his arms. "My girl, where have you been? I was so worried." Lily ran to hug him, and for the first time in weeks, Richard saw his daughter act like a normal child, without the burden of survival on the streets or the traumatic revelations of the past few days. "Father Michael, this is my daddy," she said, pulling Richard by the hand. "I found him." The priest looked at Richard with renewed interest. "Ah, so you are the father of our little Lily. Isabel always talked about you, you know." "She did?" Richard asked, surprised. "Yes, she said you were a good man, but that you didn't know of the girl's existence. She carried a great sadness for not being able to tell the truth." The priest paused, studying Richard's face. "But she also said that she was afraid that bad people would use that information to hurt you both." Director Jenkins approached. "Father Michael, the girl told us that Isabel hid some important documents here in the church. Do you know anything about that?" "Ah, yes," said the priest, nodding gravely. "Isabel asked me to keep a special box. She said that if something happened to her, I should deliver it only to the authorities or to Lily's father." "Where is that box?" Dr. Olson asked. "Come with me," said Father Michael, leading the group inside the church. The interior of the temple was simple but welcoming, with wooden benches worn by time and a modest altar decorated with wildflowers. The priest led them to a small room in the back, which served as a sacristy and office. "Isabel hid the box here," he said, moving a heavy bookcase to reveal a small hiding place in the wall. "She said that this was the safest place she knew, because God would protect the important secrets." The box he removed was larger than the other two, and when they opened it, they found an impressive amount of documents, photographs, and even some recordings on old cassette tapes. "Oh my God," murmured Dr. Olson, examining the papers. "Isabel documented everything. There are records here of at least 2 years of criminal activity." Lily approached the box and pointed to a specific tape. "This one is special. Mum always said that on this tape there was proof of who was the boss of all the bad men." Director Jenkins picked up the tape. "Father, do you have an old recorder?" Of course, my daughter. Here at the church we still use equipment from the 80s, he said, laughing and looking for a dusty cassette recorder. When the tape began to play, Isabel's voice filled the small sacristy, clear and determined. This recording was made on March 15th, 2019. I am recording a conversation that I overheard between Dr. Robert Harris and a man he calls Boss. They, who don't know I'm here cleaning the office next door. Then they heard a muffled but understandable conversation between Dr. Harris and another male voice that Richard immediately recognized as being Ron's. "The mining contracts are yielding more than we expected," said Ron's voice. "With the information that Gillian passes us, we can anticipate all of Richard's moves." "What about the cleaning lady who saw the documents?" Dr. Harris asked. "Isabel? She's under control. But if she becomes a problem, we have the daughter as collateral." "How so?" "The girl is Richard's daughter. If Isabel talks too much, we can use that to destroy his marriage and take total control of the company." Gillian covered her mouth with her hands, horrified to hear how she had been manipulated. Richard clenched his fists, his anger growing with each word. The recording continued. "Also, if we have to eliminate Isabel from the game, the child will be orphaned and vulnerable. We can use that too." "Eliminate?" Dr. Harris repeated nervously. "Not physically, you idiot. But there are other ways to neutralize someone. A psychiatric commitment, for example, can last for years." The silence in the sacristy was absolute. Everyone looked at Lily, who listened to everything with an expression too mature for her age. "That's what they did to Mom," she said calmly. "They made her get sick in the head so that no one would believe the things she said." Director Jenkins stopped the recorder. "That's enough evidence to convict Ron of several crimes, including conspiracy and coercion." Father Michael shook his head sadly. "Isabel knew she was in danger in the last weeks before she needed to be committed. She came here every day to pray and organize these documents." "Father," said Lily, "there's one more thing that Mom hid. Not here in the church, but in another special place." Everyone turned to her. "Where?" "My daughter," Richard asked. "At the hospital where she worked. She said she hid a last proof in the place where it all began." At that moment, Director Jenkins's cell phone rang. She answered quickly, and her expression turned grave. "I understand. Thank you very much for the information," she said, hanging up. "Ron Graham was seen in the vicinity of City Hospital an hour ago. It seems he's trying to recover." "Something there. He must have heard our conversation about the hospital documents," said Dr. Olson. "Or someone informed him," added the director, looking significantly at Dr. Harris, who was in custody in a patrol car outside. Lily pulled Richard's hand. "Daddy, we need to get there first. If the bad man gets Mom's papers, he'll destroy everything." "Don't worry, my daughter. We're not going to let that happen," Richard promised. But internally, he was terrified of the possibility of losing the last evidence that could completely exonerate him and ensure that Ron paid for all his crimes. Gillian, who had remained silent throughout the revelation of the recordings, finally spoke. "Director, I want to formally confess my participation in all of this, and I want to help arrest Ron." "How do you intend to do that?" asked the director. "I know how he thinks. I know where he would hide evidence in the hospital and how he would try to destroy it." Gillian looked at Lily with tears in her eyes. "It's the least I can do to make up for what I did to this family." Lily let go of Richard's hand and approached Gillian. "Aunt Gillian, you were also being deceived by the bad men. Mom always said that when people do wrong things out of fear, they deserve forgiveness." The simplicity and wisdom of the girl touched Gillian deeply, who knelt and hugged Lily tightly. "Thank you, my dear. You have a bigger heart than many adults." Father Michael blessed the group before they left. "Go with God, and remember that the truth always prevails over lies." As they headed to the hospital, none of them knew that Ron had overheard part of the conversation through a listening device he had planted in Dr. Harris's car. He knew they were coming, and he had prepared a trap that would put Lily in real danger. For the first time since she had found her father, City Hospital of Willow Creek stood as a monument to public neglect. Peeling walls, windows with broken glass patched with duct tape, and a parking lot full of potholes that filled with dirty water with every rain. It was hard to believe that in a place intended to heal people, so much corruption had flourished in the shadows. Lily squeezed Richard's hand as they walked towards the main entrance, flanked by the FBI agents and Director Jenkins. Her perfect memory had already begun to work, remembering every corridor, every door, every hiding place that her mother had shown her during the months she had worked there. "Mom always said that the hospital was like a maze," she said, her small voice echoing in the main lobby. She knew all the secret places where the doctors kept things they didn't want anyone to see. Gillian watched everything with an expression of deep guilt. Being in that place, knowing that her collaboration had allowed Dr. Harris to continue extorting desperate families, made her stomach churn with self-disgust. "Lily," said Director Jenkins, kneeling next to the girl, "you need to be very brave now. Where did your mother hide the last documents?" "In the basement," Lily replied without hesitation. "There's a room down there where they keep the old files. Mom said it was the perfect place because no one ever went there, only her to clean." Dr. Olson frowned. "Basement? I didn't know this hospital had a basement." "Most people don't," said a voice behind them. Everyone turned to see Dr. Eleanor Vance, the hospital's medical director, approaching with a worried expression. She was a woman of 50 years old, grey hair tied in a severe bun, and tired eyes that reflected years dealing with the precariousness of the public health system. "Dr. Vance," said Director Jenkins, showing her identification, "we are investigating administrative irregularities in this hospital." "That's what I wanted to talk to you about," said the doctor, looking nervously around. "Dr. Harris was arrested today, and since then I have been receiving threatening calls. Someone is trying to intimidate me into destroying certain documents." "What kind of documents?" Dr. Olson asked. "Records of medications that were overbilled, lists of families that were charged for treatments that should be free, proof of suspicious bank transfers." The doctor paused, looking at Lily. "And you must be Isabel's daughter. She talked about you a lot." "Did you know my mum?" Lily asked, her eyes lighting up. "I did, dear. She was one of the most dedicated employees we've ever had here, and also one of the most observant." Dr. Vance crouched down to get to the girl's level. "Your mother came to me several times, trying to report irregularities, but I didn't listen at the time. I thought she was exaggerating." "Why didn't you believe her?" Gillian asked. "Because Dr. Harris always said that Isabel had mental problems, that she made up stories." The doctor shook her head with regret. "Now I realize that he was deliberately undermining her credibility." At that moment, the hospital lights flickered and then went out completely, leaving only emergency lighting working. A murmur of concern spread among the patients and staff in the lobby. "This is not normal," said Dr. Vance, picking up her radio. "Security, what's happening with the electricity?" A crackling voice replied, "Someone turned off the main generator in the basement. We're trying to reactivate it, but access is blocked." "Operation?" Richard asked. "Not just in charge," said Dr. Harris, looking directly at Lily. "He knew about the girl's paternity even before you found out. He was the one who ordered me to keep Isabel under control." "How did he know?" Gillian asked. "Because he arranged the original DNA test," revealed Dr. Harris. "Ron suspected you were having an affair, Richard, and investigated. When he found out about Isabel and the child, he saw an opportunity for future blackmail." Richard felt a homicidal rage grow inside him. "You're saying that Ron knew that Lily was my daughter 5 years ago and never told me?" "He was saving that information for the right moment. He planned to use it to force you to hand over your share of the company to him, At that moment, the officers who were digging in the garden shouted that they had found something. A second metal box was unearthed, this one even better preserved than the first. When they opened it, they found not only the DNA test confirming Richard's paternity, but also a handwritten letter from Isabel and a series of photographs showing Ron handing money to Dr. Harris on several occasions. Dr. Olson picked up the letter and read aloud, "If something happens to me, please give these evidences to the authorities. My daughter Lily is the daughter of Richard Sterling, a good man who doesn't know of her existence. She deserves to meet her real father, and he deserves to know that he has a daughter who loves him even without knowing him. Dr. Harris and Ron. Graham are using information about my family to blackmail innocent people. They are dangerous. Please protect my girl." Tears streamed down Richard's face as he hugged Lily tightly. "Your mother was a very brave woman," he whispered. "I know," Lily replied, resting her head on his chest. "She always said that one day I would find my real daddy and that he would protect me from all the bad things." Director Jenkins closed the handcuffs on Dr. Harris. "Do you have more information about Ron Graham's whereabouts?" "Lily said there are more documents hidden at St. Sebastian's Church," Gillian reminded. "Then that's where we're going now," said the director. "This corruption network ends today." But what none of them knew was that Ron hadn't fled the city. He was watching the mansion from afar and had overheard about the documents at the church. A race against time was about to begin. St. Sebastian's Church stood on the outskirts of Willow Creek, like a refuge forgotten by time. It was a simple stone building with only one bell tower and stained glass windows that had already lost much of their original shine. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy, creating a heavy atmosphere that matched the tension of the group approaching the temple. Lily walked between Richard and Gillian, holding both their hands. The discovery that Richard was her father had created a strange sense of completeness in her small heart, as if a piece that had always been missing had finally found its place. At the same time, seeing Gillian so shattered by guilt awakened in her a deep compassion. "That's where Mom and I slept when it was very cold," Lily said, pointing to a small side annex of the church. "Father Michael always left the door open for people who had nowhere to stay." Director Jenkins and her men had arrived before them, and were already talking to an elderly gentleman in a black cassock, who gestured animatedly as he spoke. When he saw Lily approaching, the priest's face lit up with a genuine smile. "Lily!" exclaimed Father Michael, 78, opening his arms. "My girl, where have you been? I was so worried." Lily ran to hug him, and for the first time in weeks, Richard saw his daughter act like a normal child, without the burden of survival on the streets or the traumatic revelations of the past few days. "Father Michael, this is my daddy," she said, pulling Richard by the hand. "I found him." The priest looked at Richard with renewed interest. "Ah, so you are the father of our little Lily. Isabel always talked about you, you know." "She did?" Richard asked, surprised. "Yes, she said you were a good man, but that you didn't know of the girl's existence. She carried a great sadness for not being able to tell the truth." The priest paused, studying Richard's face. "But she also said that she was afraid that bad people would use that information to hurt you both." Director Jenkins approached. "Father Michael, the girl told us that Isabel hid some important documents here in the church. Do you know anything about that?" "Ah, yes," said the priest, nodding gravely. "Isabel asked me to keep a special box. She said that if something happened to her, I should deliver it only to the authorities or to Lily's father." "Where is that box?" Dr. Olson asked. "Come with me," said Father Michael, leading the group. Inside the church, the interior of the temple was simple but welcoming, with wooden benches worn by time and a modest altar decorated with wildflowers. The priest led them to a small room in the back, which served as a sacristy and office. Isabel hid the box. "Here," he said, moving a heavy bookcase to reveal a small hiding place in the wall. She said that this was the safest place she knew because God would protect the important secrets. The box he removed was larger than the other two, and when they opened it, they found an impressive amount of documents, photographs, and even some recordings on old cassette tapes. "Oh my God," murmured Dr. Olson, examining the papers. "Isabel documented everything. There are records here of at least 2 years of criminal activity." Lily approached the box and pointed to a specific tape. "This one is special. Mom always said that on this tape there was proof of who was the boss of all the bad men." Director Jenkins picked up the tape. "Father, do you have an old recorder?" "Of course, my daughter. Here at the church we still use equipment from the 80s, he said, laughing and looking for a dusty cassette recorder. When the tape began to play, Isabel's voice filled the small sacristy, clear and determined. "This recording was made on March 15th, 2019. I am recording a conversation that I overheard between Dr. Robert Harris and a man he calls Boss. They don't know I'm here, cleaning the office next door. Then they heard a muffled but understandable conversation between Dr. Harris and another male voice that Richard immediately recognized as being Ron's. "The mining contracts are yielding more than we expected," said Ron's voice. "With the information that Gillian passes us, we can anticipate all of Richard's moves." "What about the cleaning lady who saw the documents?" Dr. Harris asked. "Isabel, she's under control, but if she becomes a problem, we have the daughter as collateral." "How so?" "The girl is Richard's daughter. If Isabel talks too much, we can use that to destroy his marriage and take total control of the company." Gillian covered her mouth, with her hands horrified to hear how she had been manipulated. Richard clenched his fists, his anger growing with each word. The recording continued. "Also, if we have to eliminate Isabel from the game, the child will be orphaned and vulnerable. We can use that too." "Eliminate?" Dr. Harris repeated nervously. "Not physically, you idiot. But there are other ways. To neutralize someone. A psychiatric commitment, for example, can last for years." The silence in the sacristy was absolute. Everyone looked at Lily, who listened to everything with an expression too mature for her age. "That's what they did to Mom," she said calmly. "They made her get sick in the head so that no one would believe the things she said." Director Jenkins stopped the recorder. "That's enough evidence to convict Ron of several crimes, including conspiracy and coercion." Father Michael shook his head sadly. "Isabel knew she was in danger. In the last weeks before she needed to be committed, she came here every day to pray and organize these documents." "Father," said Lily, "there's one more thing that Mom hid. Not here in the church, but in another special place." Everyone turned to her. "Where, my daughter?" Richard asked. "At the hospital where she worked. She said she hid a last proof in the place where it all began." At that moment, Director Jenkins's cell phone rang. She answered quickly, and her expression turned grave. "I understand. Thank you very much for the information," she said, hanging up. "Ron Graham was seen in the vicinity of City Hospital an hour ago. It seems he's trying to recover something there." "He must have heard our conversation about the hospital documents," said Dr. Olson. "Or someone informed him," added the director, looking significantly at Dr. Harris, who was in custody in a patrol car outside. Lily pulled Richard's hand. "Daddy, we need to get there first. If the bad man gets Mum's papers, he'll destroy everything." "Don't worry, my daughter. We're not going to let that happen," Richard promised. But internally he was terrified of the possibility of losing the last evidence that could completely exonerate him and ensure that Ron paid for all his crimes. Gillian, who had remained silent throughout the revelation of the recordings, finally spoke. "Director, I want to formally confess my participation in all of this, and I want to help arrest Ron." "How do you intend to do that?" asked the director. I know how he thinks. I know where he would hide evidence in the hospital and how he would try to destroy it. Gillian looked at Lily with tears in her eyes. It's the least I can do to make up for what I did to this family. Lily let go of Richard's hand and approached Gillian. Aunt Gillian, you were also being deceived by the bad men. Mum always said that when people do wrong things out of fear, they deserve forgiveness. The simplicity and wisdom of the girl touched Gillian deeply, who knelt and hugged Lily tightly. Thank you, my dear. You have a bigger heart than many adults. Father Michael blessed the group before they left. Go with God, and remember that the truth always prevails over lies. As they headed to the hospital, none of them knew that Ron had overheard part of the conversation through a listening device he had planted in Dr. Harris's car. He knew they were coming, and he had prepared a trap that would put Lily in real danger for the first time since she had found her father. City Hospital of Willow Creek stood as a monument to public neglect. Peeling walls, windows with broken glass patched with duct tape, and a parking lot full of potholes that filled with dirty water with every rain. It was hard to believe that in a place intended to heal people, so much corruption had flourished in the shadows. Lily squeezed Richard's hand as they walked towards the main entrance, flanked by the FBI agents and Director Jenkins. Her perfect memory had already begun to work, remembering every corridor, every door, every hiding place that her mother had shown her during the months she had worked there. Mum always said that the hospital was like a maze, she said, her small voice echoing in the main lobby. She knew all the secret places where the doctors kept things they didn't want anyone to see. Gillian watched everything with an expression of deep guilt. Being in that place, knowing that her collaboration had allowed Dr. Harris to continue extorting desperate families, made her stomach churn with self-disgust. Lily, said Director Jenkins, kneeling next to the girl, you need to be very brave now. Where did your mother hide the last documents? In the basement, Lily replied without hesitation. There's a room down there where they keep the old files. Mom said it was the perfect place because no one ever went there, only her to clean. Dr. Olson frowned. Basement? I didn't know this hospital had a basement. Most people don't, said a voice behind them. Everyone turned to see Dr. Eleanor Vance, the hospital's medical director, approaching with a worried expression. She was a woman of 50 years old, grey hair tied in a severe bun and tired eyes that reflected years dealing with the precariousness of the public health system. Dr. Vance, said Director Jenkins, showing her identification, we are investigating administrative irregularities in this hospital. That's what I wanted to talk to you about, said the doctor, looking nervously around. Dr. Harris was arrested today, and since then I have been receiving threatening calls. Someone is trying to intimidate me into destroying certain documents. What kind of documents? Dr. Olson asked. Records of medications that were overbilled, lists of families that were charged for treatments that should be free, proof of suspicious bank transfers. Oh, the doctor paused, looking at Lily. And you must be Isabel's daughter. She talked about you a lot. Did you know my mom? Lily asked, her eyes lighting up. I did, dear. She was one of the most dedicated employees we've ever had here. And also one of the most observant. Dr. Vance crouched down to get to the girl's level. Your mother came to me several times trying to report irregularities, but I didn't listen at the time. I thought she was exaggerating. Why didn't you believe her? Gillian asked. Because Dr. Harris always said that Isabel had mental problems, that she made up stories. The doctor shook her head with regret. Now I realize that he was deliberately undermining her credibility. At that moment, the hospital lights flickered and then went out completely, leaving only emergency lighting working. A murmur of concern spread among the patients and staff in the lobby. This is not normal, said Dr. Vance, picking up her radio. Security, what's happening with the electricity? a crackling voice replied. Someone turned off the main generator in the basement. We're trying to reactivate it, but access is blocked. Director Jenkins and Richard exchanged worried glances. Ron, he murmured. Lily, said the director urgently, can you lead us to the basement even in the dark? I can, replied the girl with determination. Mom always said I had cat eyes in the dark. The group headed for a side staircase that Lily had identified as access to the basement. They descended carefully, using cell phone flashlights to illuminate the way. The smell of mold and chemicals intensified with each step. There, Lily whispered, pointing to a metal door at the end of a narrow corridor. That's the old file room. As they approached the door, they heard noises coming from inside. Hurried footsteps, drawers being opened and closed violently, paper being torn. Director Jenkins signaled for everyone to be silent and positioned herself next to the door. With a quick movement, she opened it. FBI, hands up. Ron Graham was in the middle of the room, surrounded by piles of documents, some already burned, in a makeshift trash can. His clothes were dirty and disheveled, and his eyes had the desperate expression of a cornered animal. You're too late, he said with a bitter smile. I've already destroyed most of the evidence. Not all of it, said Lily, letting go of Richard's hand and walking directly towards a specific bookcase. Lily, get back here! Richard shouted, but the girl ignored the command. She headed for a corner of the room where there was an old bookcase, full of dusty files. With precise movements, as if following a mental map, she moved some folders and revealed a small secret compartment behind them. Mom hid the most important folder here, she said, taking out a sealed envelope. She said, this place was special because it had the same birthmark that I have on my arm. Lily pointed to a small crescent-shaped mark on the wood of the bookcase, identical to a birthmark she had on her right arm. Ron tried to move towards the girl, but the officers immobilized him immediately. No! He shouted. You don't know what you're doing. That envelope contains information that can destroy important people. What kind of information? Asked Director Jenkins, taking the envelope from Lily's hands. When she opened it, she found documents that made her eyes widen. Jesus Christ, she murmured. What is it? Dr. Olson asked. They are records of patients who died from lack of medications that were diverted for illegal sale, said the director, her voice filled with indignation. And there is a list of at least 20 public officials who received bribes to facilitate the scheme. Dr. Vance looked at the documents over the director's shoulder and turned pale. Some of these patients, I remember them. Entire families who lost loved ones because they couldn't afford the medications. How many people died because of what you did? Richard asked Ron, his voice trembling with contained anger. They weren't direct deaths, Ron tried to justify himself. They were people who were already sick. They were children, Dr. Vance exploded, pointing to one of the lists. I see at least 10 children here who died of treatable diseases. Lily approached Gillian, who was crying silently as she read the names on the list. Aunt Gillian, you didn't know this was happening when you helped them. No, my dear, Gillian sobbed. I never imagined it could be so serious. I just wanted to have a baby, and they took advantage of my desperation. Ron used the emotional commotion of the group to try once again to justify his actions. Do you think I wanted this to happen? The public system is a sham. I just found a way to make it more efficient. Efficient? Director Jenkins repeated incredulously. You call it efficiency to let children die for lack of medicine? The money we diverted was used to improve other sectors of the hospital. Lies, said Dr. Vance firmly. The money was used to enrich you and bribe officials. This hospital continues to be a disgrace. Lily, who had remained quiet during the discussion, suddenly approached Ron. Her expression was too serious for a 6-year-old. Uncle Ron, she said, using the same tone she had used when she didn't yet know he was a criminal. Did you make my mom get sick in the head on purpose? Ron avoided looking directly at her. Isabel already had unstable psychological tendencies. Answer the question, said Richard, approaching threateningly. We may have used some substances to accelerate the process, but she was already heading in that direction. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the officers seemed shocked by Ron's casual confession. You poisoned my mother? Lily asked, her voice small but filled with a deep pain. They were just some psychiatric medications mixed in her food, admitted Ron, realizing that there was no more hiding anything. We wanted her to look crazy so that no one would believe her reports. Richard had to be restrained by the officers to keep from throwing himself at Ron. You destroyed the mind of an innocent woman. You separated a mother from her daughter and condemned dozens of people to death for greed, added Director Jenkins. At that moment, the hospital lights came back on, completely illuminating the basement room. Everyone could clearly see the extent of the destruction that Ron had tried to cause. Piles of burned documents, ashes scattered on the floor, evidence of years of systematic crimes. But they could also see something that no one had noticed before. On the wall behind the bookcase, where Lily had found the last envelope, there were dozens of small drawings made in pencil. Drawings of birds, flowers, and hearts, clearly made by a child. Mom brought me here sometimes when she had no one to leave me with, explained Lily, gently touching one of the drawings. She said that while she cleaned, I could draw on the wall because no one else came here. Gillian knelt next to the drawings, touching them as if they were sacred relics. She brought you to the place where she worked because she had no choice, and yet you managed to find beauty to draw. Mom always said that no matter how dark a place is, you can always find something beautiful if you look hard enough. Lily's simple wisdom touched everyone present deeply. Even after discovering that she had been poisoned intentionally, that her mental illness had been induced by greedy men, she could still find beauty and hope. Let's get out of here, said Director Jenkins, handcuffing Ron. We have enough evidence to convict him of multiple crimes, including manslaughter and poisoning. As they climbed the stairs of the basement, Lily held Richard's and Gillian's hands tightly. Daddy, now that we've discovered the whole truth, is Mom going to get better? Lily's question about her mother's recovery echoed through the tense silence as the group left the hospital. Richard looked at the daughter he had just discovered, his heart breaking as he saw the pure hope in her eyes. How to explain to a 6-year-old that some damage can be irreversible? Honey, he said carefully, we're going to find out where your mom is and what we can do to help her. Dr. Olson, who had remained thoughtful throughout the operation in the hospital, approached them. Richard, now that we have all this evidence about Isabel's deliberate poisoning, I can file legal actions to reverse her compulsory commitment. If she was drugged against her will, the entire psychiatric evaluation was based on artificial symptoms. Where is she committed? Asked Gillian, who hadn't stopped crying since she had learned of the real extent of the crimes she had helped facilitate. Director Jenkins consulted her files. According to the records we found, Isabel Santos is committed to the Willow Creek State Psychiatric Hospital for 3 years. Lily pulled Richard's sleeve. Is it far from here? A little, my daughter, but we can visit her. I want to see Mom, she said with determination. I want to tell her that I found my daddy and that the bad men were arrested. That night, back at the Sterling mansion, the reunited family faced a new reality. The charges against Richard had been completely dropped. His company was free from the shadow of corruption, but the emotional damage of the whole situation was profound. Lily was in the room that Gillian had prepared for her, not the room of the lost daughter that remained closed, but a new space decorated especially for her, with drawings of birds on the walls and a small bed with colorful sheets. Daddy, she said when Richard came to say goodnight, can I ask you something? Of course, my flower. Why did Aunt Gillian do those bad things? She seems like a good person. Richard sat on the edge of the bed, thinking carefully about how to answer. Sometimes, Lily, when people want something very much and are suffering, they make wrong decisions. Gillian wanted very much to have a baby, and that made her accept help from bad people. Like I wanted very much to find you and Mom. Exactly. But you were lucky because the people who helped you were good. Gillian wasn't so lucky. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing the information with her extraordinary intelligence. Daddy, do you forgive Aunt Gillian? The question caught Richard off guard. He had spent the entire day oscillating between anger and understanding, struggling to process his wife's betrayal. I'm still trying to understand everything, Lily. It's hard to forgive when someone we love hurts us. But she was also hurt by the bad men, Lily observed, and she's very sad now. From the next room, Gillian listened to the conversation through the thin wall. She had spent hours sitting on the floor of the room, surrounded by anxiety medications that she didn't dare to take, trying to process the magnitude of her participation in the crimes. When Richard left Lily's room, he found Gillian waiting for him in the hallway, her eyes red and swollen. "She's right," said Gillian quietly. "I was hurt by the bad men, but that doesn't justify what I did to you." Gillian. "No, let me talk," she interrupted. "I destroyed our family out of selfishness. I destroyed Isabel's life out of envy, and I almost cost the life of an innocent child. You didn't know the extent of the crimes. But I knew that I was betraying you. I knew that I was passing confidential information to people who wanted to hurt you." Gillian leaned against the wall, as if she didn't have the strength to stand. "And when Isabel tried to warn me about what was happening, I silenced her for fear of losing you." Richard observed the woman he had been married to for 15 years. She seemed to have aged 10 years in one day. "What do you want from me, Gillian? Forgiveness? Punishment?" "I want a chance to try to fix at least a part of what I broke." She looked towards Lily's room. "I want to help Isabel recover. I want Lily to have her mother back." "What about us?" Gillian smiled sadly. "I don't think there's a us anymore, Richard. At least, not as it was before. But maybe we can find a way to be a family for Lily. She's going to need stability when Isabel comes back." The next morning, the trio headed to Barbacena, corrected to Willow Creek State Psychiatric Hospital to maintain consistency. The 2-hour drive was made in contemplative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Lily watched the landscape. Through the window, her mind photographing every detail of the journey to reunite with her mother. The Willow Creek State Psychiatric Hospital was a huge and intimidating complex, with old buildings surrounded by high walls. When they entered the reception, they were greeted by Dr. David Morgan, the psychiatrist responsible for Isabel's case. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need to warn you that Isabel's state is complex," he said, consulting a voluminous chart. "She presents severe symptoms of schizophrenia and paranoia, with frequent episodes of hallucinations." "Doctor," said Dr. Olson, "we brought evidence that these symptoms may have been induced artificially through medications administered without her knowledge." Dr. Morgan examined the documents that the FBI had provided, his eyes widening progressively. "My God," he murmured. "If this is true, it means that her diagnosis may be completely wrong." "Can we see her?" asked Lily, her voice small but determined. "Honey, your mother is in a very delicate state. She may not recognize you." "She'll recognize me," said Lily with absolute confidence. "Mothers always recognize their children." Dr. Morgan led them through long and sterile corridors to a specific wing of the hospital. When they stopped in front of a door with a small glass window, he turned to them. "She's sedated most of the time because the episodes were very violent. But today, she's relatively calm." Through the window, they could see a thin woman of approximately 30 years old, sitting on a simple bed, staring blankly at the wall. Her brown hair was long and disheveled, and she wore a faded blue hospital pajama. Lily pressed her face against the glass. "Mom," she whispered. As if she had heard, Isabel turned her head towards the window. For a moment, her eyes met Lily's, and something moved in her empty expression. "Can I go in?" Lily asked. "I don't know if it's a good idea," hesitated Dr. Morgan. "Please," insisted Richard. "This child spent 3 years on the streets believing that her mother had died. She needs this encounter." Reluctantly, Dr. Morgan opened the door. Lily entered slowly, followed by Richard, Gillian, and the doctor. "Mom," said Lily softly. Isabel looked at her with confusion, as if she were trying to focus on something very distant. "Lily," she murmured, you've grown." "I have, Mom, and I have many things to tell you." Isabel extended a trembling hand, gently touching her daughter's face. "Are you real? Sometimes I see you, but then you disappear." "I'm real, Mom, and I won't disappear anymore." Dr. Morgan watched the interaction with professional fascination. "It's extraordinary. She hasn't demonstrated this mental clarity in months." Lily sat on the edge of the bed, taking her mother's hand. "Mom, I found my daddy, and the bad men were arrested." "Bad men?" Isabel repeated, a shadow of fear passing through her eyes. "Dr. Harris and Uncle Ron. They can't hurt anyone anymore." Isabel looked over Lily and saw Richard standing near the door. Her eyes widened with recognition and fear. "Mr. Sterling?" she said, trying to shrink back on the bed. "I didn't tell anything. I promise I didn't tell about the girl." "Isabel," Richard said gently, approaching slowly. "You don't have to be afraid. I know about Lily. I know she's my daughter, and I know what they did to you." The confusion on Isabel's face was painful to see. Years of forced medication and psychological manipulation had left deep scars on her mind. "They said that if I told, you both would die," she whispered. Gillian approached the bed, tears streaming down her face. "Isabel, it's me, Gillian. I need to ask for your forgiveness, for everything." Isabel looked at her with a mixture of recognition and confusion. "Mrs. Sterling, you yelled at me." "I did, and I deeply regret it. I was wrong, and you were trying to protect your daughter." Dr. Morgan made notes quickly in his chart. This sudden clarity, this ability to recognize specific people and events, is consistent with the theory that the psychotic symptoms were drug-induced. "What does that mean for her recovery?" Richard asked. "It means that with the right treatment, with detoxification from the substances she was receiving and appropriate therapy, she can recover significantly." Lily squeezed her mother's hand. "Did you hear, Mum? You're going to get better." Isabel looked at her daughter with a clarity she hadn't demonstrated in years. "My girl, are you safe now?" "I am, Mum. I have a daddy who protects me, and even Aunt Gillian is taking care of me. And do you forgive Mom for leaving you alone?" Lily smiled, the same radiant smile that had won Richard over at the bakery. "Mom, you never left me alone. You were always here," she said, touching her own heart. "And now we're going to be together for real." At that moment, seeing his daughter reunite with her mother, Richard felt that he had finally found the purpose he had lost when Sophia died. But there were still enormous challenges ahead, starting with Isabel's long journey of recovery and the rebuilding of a family that had been shattered by greed and manipulation. 3 months had passed since the reunion at the psychiatric hospital, and Isabel's recovery was progressing surprisingly well. Dr. Morgan had become personally invested in the case, fascinated by the speed with which the psychotic symptoms diminished as the artificial substances were eliminated from her system. Lily visited her mother 3 times a week, always accompanied by Richard or Gillian, sometimes by both. The girl had become a source of emotional stability for Isabel, whose memory and mental clarity returned gradually, like pieces of a puzzle being reorganized. "Mom is remembering more things every day," Lily told Father Michael during one of her visits to the church. The old priest had become a constant figure in the girl's life, offering not only spiritual support but also helping with practical issues of the new family dynamic. "And how do you feel about that, my child?" asked Father Michael, adjusting his glasses as he watched Lily draw in a new notebook that Richard had given her. "Happy, but also a little scared," she admitted, stopping drawing a bird to look at the priest. "What if she remembers the bad things and gets sad again?" "The bad memories are part of who we are, Lily. But your mother also has many good memories with you, and now she has new good memories being created every day." Back at the mansion, the dynamic between Richard and Gillian had settled into a respectful but distant coexistence. They slept in separate rooms and rarely talked about anything that wasn't related to Lily's well-being or the care of Isabel. That afternoon, Dr. Morgan called with news that changed everything. "Richard, I need to talk to you urgently," said the psychiatrist. "It's about Isabel. There are complications." "What kind of complications?" Richard asked, feeling his stomach clench. "Come to the hospital. Bring Lily too. Isabel is asking for her." The drive to Willow Creek State Psychiatric Hospital had never seemed so long. Lily noticed the tension in the adults and shrank back in the back seat of the car, her survival instincts from the streets alerting her to the emotional danger that was approaching. At the hospital, Dr. Morgan greeted them with a grave expression. "Isabel had what we can call a traumatic awakening. As her mind clears, she's beginning to process everything that has happened to her in recent years. The reality of what was done to her is causing severe panic episodes." "What does that mean?" Gillian asked. "It means that her recovery is going to be much more complex than we imagined. She's not just healing from drug poisoning, she's also dealing with deep psychological trauma. When they entered Isabel's room, they found her awake, but her eyes had a restless quality that hadn't been present in previous visits. She turned when she heard their footsteps. "Lily," she said, her voice sounding stronger and clearer than it had in months. "My girl, come here." Lily ran to the bed and hugged her mother, but noticed immediately that something was different. Isabel held her with a desperate urgency. "Mom, are you okay?" Lily asked. "I'm remembering things, honey. Things they did to me. Things I did." Isabel's voice broke. "I abandoned you. I left you alone on the streets." "You didn't abandon me, Mom. You were sick." "But I should have fought harder. I should have been stronger." Isabel began to cry, a deep and painful cry that came from the depths of her soul. "They put medicine in my food, made me see things that didn't exist, but I was still your mother. I should have protected you." Richard approached the bed. "Isabel, you were the victim of a crime. Don't blame yourself for what they did to you." "Mr. Sterling," said Isabel, turning to him with tears in her eyes, "I should have told you about Lily from the beginning. You had the right to know you were a father. Why didn't you tell me?" Isabel looked at Gillian before answering. "Because I knew you were married. I didn't want to destroy your family. And also," she hesitated, "I was afraid that you would take Lily away from me." "I would never do that," said Richard firmly. "A child needs her mother." "But I couldn't be the mother she needed," Isabel sobbed. "Look what happened to her because of me. 3 years on the streets, starving, being mistreated." Lily climbed onto the bed and hugged her mother tightly. "Mum, stop talking like that. You always took care of me the way you could, and now we have a whole family to take care of each other." Dr. Morgan, who had observed the entire interaction, made notes in his chart. "Isabel, these feelings of guilt are a normal part of the recovery process, but it's important that you understand that you were a victim of systematic manipulation." "Doctor?" said Gillian hesitantly. Is there anything I can do to help with her recovery? I feel responsible for part of what happened. Dr. Morgan thought for a moment. Actually, yes. Isabel needs to hear from you that it wasn't her fault. She needs the forgiveness of the people she feels she has hurt. Gillian approached the bed, her own tears beginning to fall. Isabel, I was the one who fired you unfairly. I was the one who threatened you when you tried to warn me about what was happening. If anyone is to blame here, it's me. Mrs. Sterling. No, let me finish. You were a dedicated employee and a loving mother. You tried to protect your daughter and do the right thing, and I punished you for that. Please forgive me. Isabel looked at Gillian for a long moment, then extended her hand. I forgive you, Mrs. Sterling, but can you forgive me for keeping the secret about Lily? There's nothing to forgive, said Gillian, holding Isabel's hand. You were protecting your daughter. Any mother would do the same. Lily watched the reconciliation between the two women with her precocious wisdom. Can we all take care of each other now? She asked. But at that moment, Dr. Morgan received an urgent call. His expression changed dramatically as he spoke. I understand. Yes, I'll inform them immediately, he said, hanging up the phone. What happened? Richard asked. That was the FBI. Ron Graham escaped from prison last night. They believe he may try something against you. A chill ran down the spines of everyone present. Isabel squeezed Lily against her, her protective instincts awakening completely for the first time in years. He can't take my daughter, she said with a fierce determination. I won't let him. No one is taking Lily, Richard promised. But we need to get out of here. This hospital is not safe. Dr. Morgan agreed. I'll arrange for Isabel's temporary discharge. She can continue treatment at home with medical supervision. As Dr. Morgan organized the paperwork, Isabel held Lily's face between her hands. My girl, Mom is leaving here today. We're going to be together now. Forever? Lily asked. Forever, promised Isabel. But her eyes showed a deep worry about what Ron might be planning. An hour later, the group left the hospital. Isabel walked slowly, still weak from months of forced medication, but her mind was clearer than it had been in years. She observed everything around her with the eyes of someone who was seeing the world again after a long nightmare. It's strange, she said to Richard as they walked to the car. For so long, everything seemed hazy, as if I were living inside a bad dream. Now that I can think straight again, I realize how much I missed of Lily's life. You didn't miss it, said Richard. You just had to fight a different battle. And now that you've won that battle, you can focus on building new memories with her. Isabel smiled, the first genuine smile she had given in years. Thank you for taking care of her when I couldn't. Thank you for giving me the most extraordinary daughter in the world. But as they drove back to Willow Creek, none of them knew that Ron had hired private investigators to track them. He had lost everything: company, money, freedom, and was determined to make Richard pay, even if it meant using Lily as a bargaining chip. The family reunion was complete, but their most difficult ordeal was yet to come. Isabel's return to the mansion was a bittersweet moment. She stood at the entrance, observing the house where she had worked years before, now returning as the mother of the owner's daughter. Her eyes scanned every detail with a painful clarity, remembering every corner she had cleaned, every conversation she had overheard by chance, every moment of fear when she discovered the extent of the corruption that took place there. It's strange to be back, she murmured to Richard as Lily ran ahead, eager to show her mother the room they had prepared for her. This is your home now, said Richard, not as an employee, but as family. Gillian had gone to great lengths to prepare a comfortable room for Isabel on the ground floor, near Lily's room. She had chosen soft colors, placed fresh flowers on the bedside table, and provided books on psychological recovery that Dr. Morgan had recommended. Mrs. Sterling, said Isabel when she saw the room, you didn't need to do all this. I did. replied Gillian firmly. "It's the least I can do after everything that has happened." Lily jumped on her mother's new bed, laughing for the first time in days. "Now we can have mother-daughter talks every night before bed," she said excitedly. But the joy of the reunion was interrupted by the insistent ringing of the doorbell. Richard looked out the window and saw 2 FBI agents standing at the door. "It must be about Ron," he said, going to answer it. The agents were Director Jenkins and a new agent, Inspector Paul Davis. Their expressions were grave. "We have news about Ron Graham's escape," said Director Jenkins, "and it's not good news." "Was he captured?" Richard asked hopefully. "No. In fact, we discovered that the escape was facilitated by accomplices from the outside. People with considerable resources helped him escape." "What kind of people?" asked Gillian, who had joined the group. "International investors who had shady deals with the mining company," explained Inspector Davis. "When Ron was arrested, they lost millions in illegal contracts. Now they want to recover their investments by any means." Isabel, who had been listening from the living room, approached with Lily at her side. "Does that mean we're all in danger?" "Unfortunately, yes," confirmed Director Jenkins. "We intercepted some communications that suggest that Ron plans to use Lily as a way to pressure Richard into signing the complete transfer of the company to him." "Kidnapping?" asked Richard, his voice filled with panic. "It's a possibility. That's why we came here to install security equipment and assign police protection for the family." Lily pulled on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, is the bad man going to try to take me?" Isabel knelt and hugged her daughter tightly. "No one is taking you, my dear. Mom won't let them." "Neither will I," added Richard, his voice filled with paternal determination. Over the next few hours, the mansion was transformed into a small fortress. Security cameras were installed, alarms connected directly to the police station, and 2 undercover agents positioned in the surrounding area of the property. But Ron was smarter than everyone imagined. That night, while the family tried to have dinner normally despite the tension, he was watching the house from a safe distance, using professional equipment provided by his new criminal partners. "They've increased security significantly," he reported to a man with a foreign accent through a communicator. "We'll need a different approach." "You said you know the weaknesses of this family," replied the voice on the communicator. "Use them." Ron smiled coldly. He did know the weakness of the Sterling family. Their desperate need to protect Lily would make them reckless. The next morning, Lily woke up from a nightmare. She had dreamed that she was back on the streets, alone and hungry, looking for her mother and Richard, but never managing to find them. "It was just a bad dream, my flower," comforted Isabel, hugging her daughter who was still trembling. "Mom is here now." "But what if the bad man separates us again?" "That's not going to happen," said Richard, entering the room with breakfast on a tray. "We have police officers taking care of us, and besides, we're a strong family now." "Can I tell you something?" Lily said hesitantly. "Of course, honey," said Isabel. "I know where Uncle Ron is hiding." Everyone in the room froze. Richard put the tray down quickly. "How do you know, Lily?" "Because last night I saw him out there. He was near the big tree, wearing those glasses that make people see in the dark." "Why didn't you tell us yesterday?" Gillian asked. "Because I wanted to be sure it was really him. But now I'm sure, and I know where he went afterward." Director Jenkins was called immediately and arrived in 15 minutes with a full team. "Lily," she said gently, "I need you to tell us exactly what you saw." He was watching the house for a long time. Then he spoke on the phone and left through the back street. "But I saw him go into Mrs. Gable's old house, the one that's been empty for years." Director Jenkins knew the house. It was a property abandoned 3 years ago after the owner had died. The perfect place for someone to hide temporarily. "We're going to organize an operation to arrest him," she said. "No," said Lily suddenly. "He's not there anymore." "How do you know?" Because this morning I saw him again, but in a different place. He was near the school, watching the children. A chill ran down everyone's spines. If Ron was watching children, his intentions were even more sinister than they imagined. He's not just interested in Lily, Richard realized. He's studying the pattern of all the children in the area, probably looking for an opportunity to grab any child to use as a bargaining chip, agreed Director Jenkins. Isabel turned pale. I can't believe someone would be capable of using children this way. Unfortunately, when desperate people associate with international criminals, there are no limits to what they can do, said Inspector Davis. At that moment, the house phone rang. Richard answered, but the line was silent for a few seconds before a familiar voice spoke. Hello, Richard. Miss your old partner. Ron, said Richard, signaling for Director Jenkins to prepare to trace the call. Where are you? That doesn't matter. What matters is that I have a proposal for you. I have nothing to negotiate with you. Oh, but you do. You have something very precious that I want. If you're talking about the company, I'm not talking about the company, Richard. I'm talking about your little daughter. Richard's blood ran cold. Across the room, Isabel covered her mouth with her hands, horrified. If you touch a finger on Lily, calm down, calm down. No need for threats. I'm offering a civilized deal. You sign the complete transfer of the mining company to me, and I disappear from your lives forever. And if I refuse, Ron's laughter was as cold as ice, then your little daughter can experience what it's like to live on the streets again, but this time without the protection of an extraordinary memory to help her survive. You won't be able to get close to her. The house is protected. Richard, you've known me for 20 years. I've always been better than you at strategy. And now I have resources that you can't even imagine. The line went dead. Director Jenkins shook her head. The call had been too brief to trace. He's playing psychologically with us, she said, trying to make us paranoid and reckless. But Lily, who had listened to the entire conversation, had an idea that surprised all the adults. I know how to catch him, she said calmly. How, my daughter? Asked Isabel. He wants to get me, right? So I can pretend that he succeeded, but you'll be protecting me secretly. Absolutely not, said Richard immediately. I'm not going to use my 6-year-old daughter as bait. But Daddy, if I don't help, he might hurt other children, and he knows this city better than the police officers. Lily's logic was disturbing in its maturity. She was willing to put herself at risk to protect other children, showing a courage that went beyond her age. We're going to find another way, said Isabel firmly. You've suffered enough in your life. But while the family debated options, Ron was already putting his plan in motion. He had discovered the only real weakness of Richard and Isabel. Their unconditional love for Lily would make them vulnerable to any threat against her, and he was ready to exploit that vulnerability to the limit. The early morning brought with it a tense stillness that precedes storms. Lily woke up at 5 in the morning with a strange feeling, as if something important was about to happen. She got up silently and walked to her bedroom window, observing the still dark garden of the mansion. That's when she saw a shadow moving near the back of the property, beyond the reach of the security cameras that had been installed. Her photographic memory immediately recorded all the details: height, way of walking, even the way the person was holding something in his right hand. Ron, she whispered to herself. Instead of screaming for help, Lily made a decision that revealed both her intelligence and her precocious courage. She took a small notebook and began to quickly draw a detailed map of all the movements she observed, noting precise times next to each position. Half an hour later, when Isabel woke up to check on how her daughter was sleeping, she found Lily sitting on the bed with the notebook full of drawings and notes. My dear, what are you doing awake so early? Asked Isabel, sitting next to her daughter. "Mom, Uncle Ron was here again, but this time I wrote down everything he did." Isabel looked at Lily's drawings and was impressed with the level of detail. The girl had mapped not only Ron's movements, but also identified blind spots in the property's security. "Lily, this is extraordinary. How were you able to see all this in the dark?" "My eyes got used to it," said Lily simply. "And there's one more thing, Mom. He wasn't alone." "What do you mean?" "There were two more people with him. They stayed hidden in the woods, but I could see when they moved." Isabel felt a chill down her spine. The situation was much more serious than they imagined. She woke Richard immediately, and in a few minutes, Director Jenkins was on her way to the mansion. "This girl is a natural observer," said Director Jenkins, examining Lily's drawings. "With this information, we can identify exactly how they're planning to break into the property. But this also confirms that they have a specific plan," said Inspector Davis. "They're not just improvising." Richard picked Lily up. "My daughter, you were very brave, but you also took a big risk. If they had seen you in the window—" "I hid whenever they looked at the house," said Lily. "And Daddy, I think I know what they want to do." "What do you think?" asked Director Jenkins. "They don't want to get me here at the house. It's too difficult and there are too many police officers. They want to get me when I leave." "But you're not going to leave," said Isabel firmly. "But I need to leave, Mom. Today is the day I was going to show you my school and introduce you to Teacher Marshall." Richard and Isabel exchanged glances. They had promised Lily that as soon as Isabel felt better, they would go together to visit the school where she had started studying 2 weeks ago. It was an important milestone for the girl, who finally had a normal life as a child. "We can postpone the visit," said Richard. "We can't," said Lily, with surprising determination. "Because if we postpone it, they'll keep watching us forever. They need to know we're not afraid." Lily's logic was, once again, disturbing in its maturity. Director Jenkins crouched down to get to her level. "Lily, what you're suggesting is very dangerous. I know, but I also know that if you don't do something soon, they're going to try to get other children from the school. I heard Uncle Ron talking on the phone yesterday about alternatives." All the adults exchanged worried glances. If Ron was considering other children as targets, the situation had become a public safety emergency. "We have to inform the school," said Inspector Davis. "We've already done that," replied Director Jenkins, "but we can't keep the school closed indefinitely without concrete evidence of a threat." It was then that Jillian, who had remained quiet throughout the discussion, spoke with a determined voice. "I'll go with them to the school." "Jillian, you don't need to get involved in this," said Richard. "I do. It was because of me that this family was exposed to this danger. It's my responsibility to help protect Lily." Isabel looked at Jillian with a new expression of growing respect. "Mrs. Sterling, I appreciate it, but I can't ask that of you." "You're not asking, I'm offering." Jillian knelt next to Lily. "Honey, do you accept me as your protecting aunt?" Lily smiled, the first genuine smile she had given since the threats began. "I accept, Aunt Jillian." Director Jenkins quickly developed a plan. The visit to the school would take place as planned, but with a disguised security operation around it. Undercover officers would be strategically positioned, and all possible escape routes would be monitored. "But there's a problem," she said. "If Ron notices the police operation, he may simply postpone his plans and try again at another time." "That's why it needs to seem natural," said Lily. "Daddy, Mom, and Aunt Jillian will go to school with me like a normal family. The police officers stay hidden, and when Uncle Ron tries something, you catch him." "What if something goes wrong?" asked Isabel, her voice filled with maternal fear. "Nothing is going to go wrong, Mom," said Lily with a confidence that touched everyone present deeply, "because now I have a whole family protecting me. 2 hours later, the group headed for the Eleanor Roosevelt Elementary School, adapted name to reflect U.S. setting. Lily walked between Richard and Isabel, holding both their hands, while Gillian walked alongside, carrying a bag that contained a tracking and communication device with the police team. The school was a simple 2-story building with a large courtyard where children played during recess. Teacher Marshall, a woman of 40 years old with a warm smile, greeted the family enthusiastically. "Lily always talks about her family," said the teacher to Isabel. "It's wonderful to finally meet the mother of our most special student." "Special how?" asked Isabel, curious. "She has an extraordinary learning ability. She absorbs information like a sponge and always helps other children with difficulties." While the teacher showed Lily's work around the school, the girl kept her senses alert. Her photographic memory automatically recorded every person, every movement, every detail. That might seem out of place. It was when they reached the courtyard that she saw something that made her heart race. A man in a dark suit was standing across the street, watching the school with excessive attention. "Aunt Gillian," she whispered, "there's a strange man over there." Gillian looked discreetly in the indicated direction and activated the communication device in her bag. "We have suspicious movement," she said quietly. The answer came immediately through a small earpiece. "Confirmed. We have visual of the target. Maintain normal routine." But Ron was more astute than they imagined. The man in the suit was just a distraction. While all the attention was focused on him, Ron had entered the school from the back, using false credentials that he had obtained through his new criminal partners. He was now walking through the school hallways, dressed as a school inspector, looking for the perfect moment to approach Lily. It was when the family was visiting the school library that Lily saw Ron approaching down the hallway. Her perfect memory recognized him immediately, despite the disguise. "He's here," she said calmly to Richard. "Where?" "Coming down the hallway, dressed as a school employee." Richard looked in the indicated direction and felt his blood run cold. Ron was only 10 feet away from them, walking confidently towards the library. "Gillian, activate the alarm," he said quietly. But before Gillian could react, Ron entered the library with a fake smile on his face. "Hello, Sterling family," he said politely, as if it were a casual encounter. "What a surprise to find you here." Isabel instinctively pulled Lily behind her, her maternal instincts entering total protection mode. Richard positioned himself between Ron and his family. "Get out of here now, Ron," said Richard in a low voice, trying not to alarm the other children in the library. "Calm down, Richard. I just came to have a civilized conversation with my goddaughter." "I'm not your goddaughter," said Lily bravely, stepping out from behind her mother. "You're a bad man who hurt my family." Ron laughed, but there was something dangerous in his eyes. "Lily, you've always been a very intelligent girl. Too intelligent for your own good." It was at that moment that Teacher Marshall realized something was wrong. "Excuse me, but who are you? I don't recall seeing you at any parent-teacher meetings." "I'm an educational inspector," Ron lied, flashing a fake badge. "I'm here for a routine evaluation." But Lily, with her extraordinary memory, noticed something. No one else did. The small gun Ron had hidden inside his jacket. "He has a gun," she said aloud, her childish voice echoing through the silent library. What happened next would change everyone's destiny forever. Lily's cry about the gun echoed through the library like an alarm, causing all the children present to turn toward the group. Teacher Marshall paled instantly, her instincts to protect the children kicking in immediately. "All children, leave the library now," she ordered in a firm but controlled voice. "Go to the principal's office and stay there." The children obeyed quickly, some confused, others clearly frightened by the teacher's urgent tone. In a few seconds, only Ron, the Sterling family, and Teacher Marshall remained in the library. Ron realized his disguise had been discovered and slowly revealed the small gun he was hiding. "You shouldn't have made things so complicated," he said, his mask of civility finally slipping completely. "Ron, there are children in this school," Richard said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Whatever your issue with me, resolve it without involving innocent people." "Innocent?" Ron laughed bitterly. "Your little girl destroyed my life. Because of her extraordinary memory, I lost everything. Company, money, freedom." "You lost everything because of your own criminal choices," Isabel retorted, placing herself protectively in front of Lily. "My daughter only revealed the truth about what you did." Gillian discreetly had managed to activate the emergency device in her purse. She knew the police were already on their way, but they needed to buy time. "Ron," she said, using the most conciliatory tone possible, "you're right about one thing. I was the one who started all this by passing information to Dr. Robert. If you want to blame someone, blame me." "Ah, Gillian," Ron said, turning the gun in her direction. "You were useful for a while, but you were always just a tool, a disposable tool." Lily watched everything with her extraordinary attention, her mind working quickly. She noticed that Ron was nervous, sweating profusely, and that his hand was trembling slightly as he held the gun. More importantly, she realized that he was positioned with his back to the only window in the library that overlooked the courtyard where the undercover officers were positioned. "Uncle Ron," she said suddenly, her childish voice cutting through the tension of the moment. "What is it, kid?" he replied irritably. "Are you scared?" The question caught Ron off guard. "Scared? What would I be scared of?" "Of going to jail, forever, of never seeing your family again, of everyone knowing you're a bad man." Ron was visibly shaken by Lily's simple but penetrating words. "I'm not afraid of anything," he shouted. "Yes, you are," Lily insisted, taking a small step toward him. "People who aren't afraid don't need guns to talk to children." Isabel tried to pull Lily back, but the girl resisted gently. There was something in her expression that suggested she had a plan. "Lily, get back here," Richard whispered urgently. "It's okay, Daddy," she said, keeping her eyes fixed on Ron. "Uncle Ron won't hurt me, because he knows that won't solve his problems." "You don't understand anything," Ron exploded. "I'm a ruined man. I have nothing left to lose." "Yes, you do," Lily said calmly. "You have a chance to do one right thing before it's too late." For a moment, something moved in Ron's face. A shadow of the man he had been before. Greed and despair completely consumed him. In that instant of hesitation, Lily did something no one expected. She approached him further, and in her sweet child's voice, began to sing softly the same song her mother used to sing to her, the song about free birds. The effect was immediate and surprising. Ron lowered the gun slightly, as if hypnotized by the simple melody. Tears began to stream down his face. "I knew that song," he murmured. "My mother used to sing it to me when I was a kid." "All mothers sing to their children," Lily said gently, "because love is stronger than anything bad." It was in this moment of emotional vulnerability that FBI Director Sarah Jenkins and her team quietly entered the library through the back doors. Ron was so absorbed in Lily's song that he didn't notice until it was too late. "Drop the gun, Ron," FBI Director Sarah Jenkins said firmly, but without aggression. "It's over." Ron looked around, seeing that he was completely surrounded. His last desperate attempt to regain some control over his destroyed life had failed. "It's really over," he said, dropping the gun to the floor. "Everything is over." As the officers handcuffed him, Ron looked one last time at Lily. "How can a 6-year-old be wiser than a 50-year-old man?" "Because she knows love," Isabel replied, hugging her daughter tightly. "And you forgot what it means." After Ron was taken away, the family gathered in the schoolyard. Lily was visibly shaken by the confrontation, but also demonstrated an extraordinary emotional maturity. "Why did you approach him?" Richard asked, still trembling with fear for what could have happened. "Because I saw that he was more afraid than any of us," Lily replied. "And people with a lot of fear sometimes do bad things. But if you show them that you're not afraid of them, sometimes they remember what it's like to be good." Teacher Marshall, who had witnessed everything, knelt beside Lily. "You were very brave, but what you did was also very dangerous." "I know," Lily said, "but I couldn't let him hurt other people. And he wasn't really going to hurt me because I reminded him of when he was a good child." FBI Director Sarah Jenkins approached the family. "With Ron's arrest and the evidence we have, we can guarantee that you are completely safe now. The corruption network has been dismantled. The international accomplices are being prosecuted, and there are no more threats against the family." But there was one final discovery that would change everything once again. "There's something else we discovered during the investigation," the director continued. "Something about Lily's neurological condition." "What did you discover?" Isabel asked, worried. "Dr. Harris contacted us after analyzing all of Lily's medical exams. Her photographic memory isn't just a natural talent. It's the result of a very rare neurological condition, but one that can be problematic if not treated properly." "Problematic how?" Richard asked. "As she grows older, the amount of information her mind stores can become overwhelming. Without the correct treatment, she could develop serious emotional processing problems." Isabel felt her world collapsing again. "Are you saying my daughter is going to get sick?" "Not necessarily," the director said quickly. "There's a very expensive experimental treatment developed by neuroscience specialists in the United States. It can help Lily control her extraordinary ability without losing it at keeping her emotionally healthy." "How much does this treatment cost?" Richard asked. "Approximately $2 million. The silence that followed was heavy. Even with the recovery of his company, Richard didn't have the resources to afford such an expensive treatment. But it was then that Jillian did something that surprised everyone. "I'll pay," she said simply. "Jillian, you don't have that kind of money," Richard said. "Yes, I do. I have an inheritance from my family that I've never used, kept in investments for years. I was saving it for when I had my own children." She looked at Lily with tears in her eyes. "But now I realize that Lily is the daughter that fate gave me to love and protect." Lily let go of her parents' hands and hugged Jillian tightly. "Thank you, Aunt Jillian. You're the best godmother aunt in the world." "No, dear," Jillian said, hugging the girl. "Thank you for teaching me what it really means to be family." But there was still one last surprise awaiting the family. Dr. Harris arrived at the school with news that no one expected, news that would reveal the final secret about Lily's extraordinary condition and forever change the understanding they had about their little heroine. Dr. Harris arrived at the school with an expression that mixed surprise and hope. His hands held a voluminous folder full of exams and documents that he had spent all night analyzing. "I apologize for interrupting this moment," he said, observing the family still recovering from the confrontation with Ron. "But I've discovered something about Lily that can't wait." "Bad news?" Isabel asked, instinctively pulling her daughter closer. "Actually, it's the best news possible," Dr. Harris said, smiling for the first time since he met the family. "After analyzing all of Lily's neurological exams and comparing them with similar cases documented internationally, I discovered that she doesn't need the experimental treatment in the United States." "What do you mean?" Richard asked. "Lily's condition is even rarer than we initially imagined. She possesses what we call adaptive eidetic memory. Unlike common photographic memory, which can become overwhelmed over time, Lily's brain has the natural ability to organize and filter information so that she'll never be overwhelmed." Lily looked at the doctor with curiosity. "Does that mean my head won't get messy when I grow up?" "Exactly, dear. Your mind is like a very well-organized library. It saves everything, but it always knows exactly where to find each piece of information. When it needs it, Gillian let out a sigh of deep relief. So she's going to be okay. Better than okay. Lily has an extraordinary gift that will develop healthily and naturally. With love, proper education, and emotional stability, which she clearly has now, she can become anything she wants to be. Teacher Marshall, who had followed the entire conversation, smiled proudly. I always knew Lily was special, but now I understand what kind of special that is. Isabel knelt beside her daughter. My dear, did you hear the doctor? You're going to continue being our extraordinary girl, but without any problems. I already knew, Lily said, with her characteristic smile, because when you have a family that loves you, any problem becomes easier to solve. 6 months later, the family's life had found a rhythm of happiness that none of them had imagined possible. The Sterling mansion had been transformed into a true home where love overcame all the scars of the past. Isabel had recovered completely, both mentally and emotionally. She now worked as the coordinator of a social program that Richard had created with part of the profits from the recovered company, a support center for mothers in vulnerable situations and their children. It's strange, she said to Richard, one sunny afternoon as they watched Lily play in the renovated garden of the mansion. I spent so much time thinking I had lost everything, but I was actually being prepared to gain an even bigger family. Richard held Isabel's hand. They had married in a simple ceremony the previous month, with Lily as the flower girl and Gillian as the bridesmaid. Sometimes fate has strange ways of fixing things. Gillian had found her purpose caring not only for Lily, but also for the other children who attended the social center. She had become a maternal figure for dozens of children who needed love and care. Aunt Gillian, Lily said one afternoon, while helping to organize toys donated to the center, are you happy now? Happier than I ever imagined I could be, Gillian replied sincerely. You know why? Because I learned that family isn't about having biological children. It's about loving and being loved. Just like our family, Lily said. We chose each other. The Hope Reborn Social Center had become a model for other cities. Richard had used his business experience to create a sustainable program that not only helped families in need, but also offered professional training and job opportunities. Daddy, Lily said one night as he put her to bed, can I tell you a secret? Of course, my flower. I always knew you were my daddy. Richard stopped tucking in the sheets. What do you mean? From the first day you saw me at O'Malley's bakery, I felt a special connection. My memory saved the feeling that you were important, even without knowing why. Why didn't you ever say anything? Because I knew you needed to figure it out, on your own, and because Mommy always said that the best things in life come when we're ready for them. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Richard found Isabel on the porch, watching the stars over Willow Creek. What are you thinking about? He asked, hugging her from behind. About how our daughter saved not only us, but also Gillian, and indirectly all the families who are now helped by the center. A 6-year-old changed so many lives. She inherited the strength of her mother, Richard said, kissing her neck softly. And the goodness of her father, Isabel replied. A year later, Lily was at school, drawing in her favorite notebook during recess, when Teacher Marshall approached. Lily, can I see what you're drawing? It's our complete family, Lily said, showing a colorful drawing that portrayed not only Richard, Isabel, and Gillian, but also all the children at the social center, Dr. Harris, Father Michael, Teacher Marshall, and even FBI Director Sarah Jenkins. Wow, what a big family, the teacher said, impressed. It's because I learned that family isn't just who lives in the same house, Lily explained. It's everyone who cares about you and who you care about too. In the part of underneath the drawing, Lily had written in her still childlike handwriting, "My family taught me that love always wins." That afternoon, when Richard came to pick Lily up from school, she ran to hug him as she did every day. "Daddy, today I understood something very important," she said, as they walked hand in hand down the street where it had all begun. "What was that, my daughter?" "That sometimes the worst things that happen to us are actually the beginning of the best things." Richard stopped walking and knelt down to be at her level. "Explain that to me." "If I hadn't gone through all those bad things, I never would have developed my special memory. If Mommy hadn't gotten sick, maybe you guys never would have found each other again. If Aunt Jillian hadn't done wrong things, she never would have learned what it is to truly love." Lily's wisdom continued to impress Richard every day. "And what else did you learn? That no matter how difficult the problems are, there's always a solution when people help each other with love." That night, during family dinner, Jillian made a special announcement. "You know that the social center has been helping many families, but I'd like to expand the project." "How so?" Isabel asked. "I want to create a special school for children with extraordinary abilities, like Lily. A place where they can develop their talents without feeling different or isolated." Lily clapped her hands, excited. "Can I help plan the school?" "Of course you can," Jillian said. "Who better than you to know what special children need?" 2 years later, the Lily Sterling School was inaugurated, becoming the first institution in the region specializing in gifted children. Lily, now 8 years old, had become not only an exemplary student, but also a little ambassador who helped other children adapt. "You know what I'm most proud of in Lily?" Isabel said to Richard as they watched their daughter playing with other children in the courtyard of the new school. "What?" "That despite everything she's been through, she's never lost her capacity to love and trust people. She's transformed her pain into strength to help others. She's just like her mother in that aspect," Richard said, smiling. That afternoon, Lily approached her parents with a thoughtful expression. "Can I ask an important question?" "Always," Richard said. "Do you think Uncle Ron is learning to be a good person in jail?" The question caught the adults by surprise. Even after everything Ron had done, Lily still worried about his redemption. "Why do you ask that?" Isabel said gently. "Because everyone deserves a chance to be good. And if he learns to be good again, maybe he can help other people when he gets out of jail." Richard hugged his daughter, marveling once again at her capacity for forgiveness and hope. "You know, you're the wisest person I know." "I'm not wise," Lily said, laughing. "I just learned that when you choose to love instead of being angry, everything gets better." That night, while putting Lily to bed, Isabel sang the old song about free birds. But now the melody had a completely new meaning. They had all learned to fly free, without the chains of the past. "Mommy," Lily said sleepily, "thank you for teaching me that even on the most difficult days, dawn always comes. Thank you, my dear, for reminding me that love is stronger than any darkness." As Isabel left the room, she found Richard and Jillian waiting in the living room, all with the same thought. A child who had started life suffering on the streets had become everyone's teacher about courage, forgiveness, and the true nature of family love. Outside the window, a bird sang in the garden tree, free and happy, just like the family that had learned that the most beautiful endings are born from the most difficult beginnings.